Okay, aldehydes and ketones. These are another group of organic compounds, but their functional group this time is a carbonyl group. A carbonyl group is composed of a carbon atom bonded to an oxygen atom with a double bond. Okay, so ang carbonyl ay C double bond O. The carbon atom should meet the 4-bond requirement, but it is already bonded with a double bond to the oxygen, so it should be attached to two other groups. For oxygen, it already meet the the 2-bond requirement. So always oxygen could be it could meet the 2-bond requirement by 2 single bond or 1 double bond. So for this case, for carbonyl, it would be double bond, 1 double bond only. Okay, so C double bond O is a carbonyl group, and that is the functional group for aldehydes and ketones. Now, what differentiate aldehyde from ketone are the alkyl groups that are attached to the carbonyl carbon. When we say carbonyl carbon, ito yan. The carbon in the carbonyl group. That is the carbonyl carbon. So if the carbonyl carbon has at least one hydrogen directly attached on it, it would be classified as aldehyde. Okay, so the carbonyl carbon should at least have one hydrogen. Okay, so ito yon. C, if we're going to read this one, CHO or C double bond OH. Okay, so at least meron siyang CHO. The other side of the carbonyl carbon could be attached to a hydrogen or a series of carbon atom. Nevertheless, it would still be an aldehyde. Okay, so it could either be a a hydrogen, an alkyl group, or cycloalkyl group, or an a benzene ring or an aromatic ring. Okay, so ulitin natin, the aldehyde, for it to be considered an aldehyde, the carbonyl carbon should bear at least one hydrogen, should always bear one hydrogen, such that the general formula for aldehyde is RCHO, RC double bond OH, or this is RCHO. Ganyan. Hindi siya RCOH because OH is for alcohol. Okay, so that's not how it is written, but rather RCHO. When you see CHO, it could be C double bond. It should be C double bond OH. So yan yung CHO. Okay, the simplest aldehyde does not have any other carbon aside from the carbonyl carbon. So the remaining bond should is allotted to a hydrogen. So hindi siya series of carbon atom, rather are. So with this one carbon atom present in this structure, so therefore this is meth. It should be methane because of one carbon atom, but this is methanol. All aldehyde will end with Al. Okay? Another example of aldehyde, so ito pa rin, it has the C double bond OH, this end, okay, and the other part would be series of carbon atom. Or it could also be an aromatic ring. Nevertheless, meron pa rin tayong carbonyl carbon with a hydrogen. Now, the common aldehydes are as follows. So we have formaldehyde, that's the common name, and the Iupac name is methanol. Meth stands for one carbon atom, ito yan, and it has the CHO, or that is the C double bond OH, and to complete the 4-bond requirement for hydrogen, for carbon atom, meron dapat isang hydrogen. Acetaldehyde is the common name for ethanol. again, F represents 2 carbon atom. So this is, meron pa rin tayong CHO sa first carbon atom. Propanal stands for 3 carbon atom with the CHO or carbonyl carbon with hydrogen, and that is propionaldehyde. Butanal is butyraldehyde. Pentanal is valeraldehyde. And propanal, when you say propanal, so it will have, so originally this is a propene. So merong double bond dun with 3 carbon atoms and a double bond. And that is acrolein. Okay, and the aromatic ring is having a common name, benzaldehyde, or that is the special name. Benzaldehyde is a benzene ring with a carbonyl group with a hydrogen. And the Iupac is benzene carbaldehyde. Now, how do we give the name or the Iupac names for aldehydes? First, you have to choose the longest chain, and that longest chain should include the carbonyl atom of the carbonyl group or the carbonyl carbon. Okay, so dapat kabilang yung carbonyl carbon dun sa longest chain. And then, you have to look for the name of the parent chain. So since the bond between this carbon are single bond, so we are going to get its alkene name, but we are going to drop the E, change the E ending from the alkane, and add Al. So yung sabi ko kanina, all aldehyde will end with Al to denote that they are under the family of aldehyde. And of course, since the priority here is the carbonyl group, it should always be assigned as carbon number 1. Okay, and then same as with other organic compounds, you have to number the parent chain, so that you could have the location for the substituent, but you always have to come up with the lowest number. However, always bear in mind that the carbonyl carbon is still carbon number 1. Okay, so let's have this example. So, for this is the carbonyl carbon. So, dapat kasama yan dun sa parent chain. If we have to choose this as a parent chain, it is only possessing 4 carbon atoms. So, however, pwede rin naman na ito ang ating parent chain. And that is eventually longer than the first na pinili natin. And for this case, okay, so if we had chosen this to be our parent chain, so kasama na si carbonyl group dun sa parent chain. And that would be, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the bond between these 5 carbon atom is single bond. So it will have a parent, an alkane name of pentane. But as a rule, we are going to drop the E and we have to add Al. So therefore, this is pentanal. We have to number this at the end near to the carbonyl group, so that this would be carbon number 1 and that would be carbon number 2. What is not included in the name pentanal is this substituent. So hindi siya kasama sa pentanal. So kailangan nating pangalanan yan. And eventually, it has 2 carbon atoms, so that is ethyl, and it is positioned at carbon 2 of that pentanal. So, the name is 2-ethyl pentanal. Okay? We are not going to put any number between pentanal because it's a rule that the carbonyl atom is always at carbon number 1. So, wala siyang chance na maging carbon 2, 3, or 4. Okay? So, hindi na natin kailangang maglagay ng number dito kasi nga, lagi, as a rule, carbon number 1 naman siya. Yung carbonyl. Okay? So, that is the final name or Iupac name for this structure is 2-ethyl pentanal. Okay? Another example is this one. So, this is the carbonyl group. It has hydrogen. So, therefore, that's a one hydrogen, so that is an aldehyde. So if you're going to expand this, there's a carbon atom there, another here on this intersection, another there, and here sa dulo. Okay, so looking at it, ang ating longest chain will have 4 carbon atoms. And 4 is butane supposed to be because it has single bonds, but because of the carbonyl group, it will fall under the family of aldehyde. So we have to drop the E and add Al. So therefore, the parent chain is butanol. Numbering system starts with the carbonyl carbon as carbon number 1. So therefore, this is carbon number 3. What is not included in the butanol is this substituent. It has only one carbon it has only one carbon atom, so therefore its name is methyl, and it is attached on the third carbon atom of the parent chain, so therefore its name is 3-methyl butanol. Okay, another example is this one. So the longest chain is composed of 5 carbon atoms, so that's pentanol. Numbering the parent chain, designating carbonyl carbon to be carbon number 1. So therefore, it would be from right to left, and this one would be carbon number 3. The identity of the substituent attached on carbon number 3 is hydroxyl. Okay, let's recall that hydroxyl, the carbonyl has higher priority over hydroxyl, so therefore hindi ito alcohol, rather it is an aldehyde because the carbonyl has higher priority over the hydroxyl. So this one will be named as 3-hydroxyl because this is the third carbon atom, being the reference one as carbonyl carbon, and the name of that is hydroxyl. But it is not going to be hydroxyl with an L, rather hydroxy only. So that would be 3-hydroxy pentanol. Okay, so another one will be parent chain has 4 carbon atoms, so that's butanol. What is not included in the butanol are 2 atoms of chlorine, so therefore we are going to have dichloro, and they are eventually attached on carbon number 2 and carbon number 3 of the parent chain, so therefore that is 2,3-dichlorobutanol. Still, the rule applies for the comma that if we have to separate two numbers, we have to use them, and dashes or hyphen are used to separate word from a number. There should also be no spaces in between the last name of the substituent and the parent chain. Okay. Next would be, if we're going to look for the longest chain, it could either be this one or this one. Okay, so for the blue one, we have 4 carbon atoms. For the second choice, we have 5 carbon atoms. So therefore, pipiliin natin yung 5 carbon atoms because as a rule, we have to choose parent chain that includes the carbonyl carbon and it has the longest number of carbon. So this time, this is pentanol, and what is not included again is these atoms or alkyl group, and that is ethyl. Okay, so saan siya naka-attach? On the second carbon atom, having a reference. Ang reference natin is the carbonyl carbon to be carbon number 1. Okay, so therefore, final answer would be 2-ethyl pentanol. Okay. So we also have this one, 2-methyl butanol, because if we're going to expand this one, there are carbon atoms here on the intersection and dito sa dulo ng line structure. So therefore, it has 4 carbon atoms, 4 carbon atom in the parent chain. Ayan yan. Butanol. And what is not included is a carbon atom. So that's methyl and it's attached on carbon number 2. So the final answer, the final name is 2-methyl butanol. Okay, so aside from series of carbon atom or alkyl, aldehyde could also have, or the carbonyl group could also be attached to an aromatic ring, and it will have a special name of benzaldehyde. So this is the benzaldehyde. Naming benzaldehyde could also follows the rules for aromatic, wherein if we're going to have this as benzaldehyde, the carbonyl carbon will always be attached to carbon number 1. And numbering it clockwise or counterclockwise for as long as you're going to arrive with the smallest number. Yeah. Okay, so for this case, we have carbon number 1 to be at the position wherein the carbonyl carbon has been attached. This could be numbered from clockwise or counterclockwise for as long as you're going to come up with the smallest set of number. So if this one would be done clockwise, this is carbon number 3 and this is carbon number 5. Okay. However, if you're going to do it counterclockwise, so this is carbon number 3 and carbon number 5. So parehas lang sila na 3 and 5, so the tiebreaker would be the alphabetical listing. So since the identity of the substituents attached, this one is chloro, which starts with C, and this one is methyl. So therefore, by alphabetical listing, chloro should have the lower number as compared to methyl. So we are going to follow the counterclockwise numbering. So this one would carbon number 3 with reference to the carbonyl carbon as number 1 being attached to the number 1 in the benzene ring, and this one is carbon number 5. So therefore, final name of this structure would be 3-chloro with this and 5-methyl dahil dito, and of course benzaldehyde. Okay, so this is the benzaldehyde, that is the chloro, it is attached on carbon number 3, and this is methyl, it's attached on carbon number 5. Okay, another example will be 4-hydroxy benzaldehyde. So this, it has the collective name of benzaldehyde. Hydroxy is not included in the benzaldehyde name, so therefore it should be included in the name of this organic compound, and it is eventually attached on carbon number 4. So kasi ito yung number 1. So that is 4-hydroxy benzaldehyde. Okay. So kanina we have aldehyde, now we have ketone. Ketone is a carbonyl containing organic compound, just like the aldehyde. However, what differentiates it from aldehyde is that the carbonyl carbon in this ketone should be attached to 2 other carbon atoms. So if this is the carbonyl carbon or the carbonyl group, dapat nakasandwich daw siya sa 2 other carbon atoms or series of carbon atoms. It could either be an alkyl, cycloalkyl, or an aryl. Okay, so wala ng hydrogen, such that ang ating general formula ay RCOR. So that's the R, C, double bond O, R. Or it could be written as RCOR. The CO in the middle represents the carbonyl group C double bond O. The simplest ketone will have 2 methyl groups attached on the carbonyl group. Okay? And other examples, so pwede rin naman na the R group is not the same with the other R group. So pwede din na cycloalkane or cycloalkyl group and an alkyl group. Okay? So for ketones, we have common names. We have common names, and it is the same as giving common names with that of ether. However, instead of putting ether as a last word, so we're going to add the word ketone. So we have to name all the alkyl groups and arrange them alphabetically, then add the word ketone. So paano ito? Okay, so if we're going to have this structure, it is a ketone because the carbonyl group has been sandwiched in between two alkyl groups or series of or two other carbon atoms. In naming, we just have to name the alkyl groups attached to the carbonyl group, and the identity of this alkyl group are methyl. Since they are both methyl, we are going to use the di prefix so that the name is dimethyl ketone, or it has a common name or special name acetone. Okay? We also have this one. So, okay lang na hindi magkaparehas yung R group na naka-attach kay carbonyl. Pwedeng parehas or pwede rin din naman na magkaiba. Nevertheless, in naming, you just have to indicate the name of both alkyl groups, arrange them alphabetically, and add the word ketone. So, for this case, this is ethyl, and this side naman is methyl, plus the word ketone. So, for this common name, if the alkyl groups attached on the carbonyl are not the same, we're going to come up with 3 words for its common name. So it is ethyl methyl ketone. Again, these names of alkyl group are arranged alphabetically. However, if the identity of the alkyl groups attached on the carbonyl for the ketone, we're going to have only 2 words because we are using the prefixes di. Okay? Then we also have common name for this one. This is a cyclohexane, supposed to be, but it is treated as a substituent. So we are dropping the E and add YL so that it could denote that it's not a parent chain, rather it is a substituent. That is the cyclohexyl. And this one is the ethyl. So arrange them alphabetically. This organic compound will have a name of cyclohexyl ethyl ketone. This one is methyl, and the 3 of this is isopropyl. Arrange them, you have to use as a basis yung iso, so that in alphabetical listing, so iso, and it's not the propyl ha. Our reference is the iso. So therefore this is isopropyl methyl ketone. Now what about for the Iupac name of ketone? Rule number 1, select the parent chain as the longest chain of carbon atom, but in that longest chain of carbon, dapat nakasama yung carbonyl carbon. Okay? So parang parehas lang din sila nung aldehyde. Kailangan nakasama ang carbonyl carbon sa parent chain. Now, we have, since this parent chain has single bond between all those carbon atoms, we are adopting the alkane name, but we are going to drop the E from the alkane's name and add ONE this time. So all ketones will end with ONE, or it could be pronounced as ON, ketone. Okay. Now, unlike the aldehyde a while ago, wherein the carbonyl carbon receives carbon number 1, for ketone, since it is sandwiched in between two other carbon atoms, you have to number the parent chain either left to right, right to left, for as long as you're going to come up with the lowest possible number assigned to carbonyl carbon. Okay, and then the rest, you have to number them coming up with the lowest number for substituents. So, mas priority na mabigyan ng lowest number si carbonyl carbon over dun sa mga substituents. Now, if you're going to have a cyclic ketones, you have to assign the carbonyl carbon as carbon number 1. And then you could number them clockwise or counterclockwise for as long as you have to arrive with the lowest number for the substituents. Okay, so for this case, this is 2-pentanone. It is very important to note the position of the carbonyl group by having a number before the parent chain's name. So this is 2-pentanone. Pent indicate that there are 5 carbon atoms. ONE because the structure follows to that of ketone wherein the carbonyl group has been attached to two other carbon atoms. It is important to put 2 here because it could be on carbon number 3 just to differentiate one from the other isomers. So, palagi for ketones, meron siyang number before the name of the parent chain. Unlike sa aldehyde kanina, hindi tayo naglalagay ng number because we always assume the carbonyl is at carbon number 1. But for ketone, nakasandwich siya, so kailangan i-indicate yung number. For this case, this is the carbons. Okay? At dito sa dulo, walang nakalagay, so therefore, may carbon dyan. Excuse me. So, for this case, the parent chain has 4 carbon atoms. So, dapat kasama daw yung carbonyl carbon sa parent chain. And that is butanone because of the 4 carbon atoms. The position of the carbonyl group is at carbon number 1 kasi ito yung mas mababa. We have to number it from right to left. This is carbon number 1, 3, and 4. Okay? We don't like the other way kasi magiging number 3 yung carbonyl carbon. So what is not included in the 2 butanone, that 2 represents the position of the carbonyl carbon. Okay? Yang 2 na yan. And then, anong pang hindi na pangalanan? Itong methyl group. And it was attached on carbon number 3. So therefore, this is 3-methyl-2-butanone. Okay? Ito, cyclic ketone. So we have carbon atom here. That's carbon number 1. Another carbon. In the cyclic structure, we have 6 carbon atoms. So that is cyclohexane. But we are dropping the E and add O and E because of the functional group carbonyl. So the whole of this is the cyclohexanone. We are not going to put any more a number here kasi it's a rule that for a cyclic ketone, the carbonyl carbon will always assume carbon number 1. So numbering this counterclockwise or clockwise, but this, I think this is clockwise, such that this substituent should be attached on carbon number 2. And that is 2-methyl cyclohexanone. Ulitin natin, wala nang number dito kasi nga, sabi dun sa rule, carbon number 1 is at the carbonyl carbon in the cyclic ketone. Okay, so this one is carbon number 1. It has 5 carbon atoms. So that is cyclopentanone. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 carbon atoms. The bromine is attached on carbon number 3, so therefore that is 3-bromocyclopentanone. Okay, this is a 3-pentanone. Okay, the position of the carbonyl group is at carbon number 3, so that is 3-pentanone. And the second and on the fourth carbon atom has methyl group. Since they are the same, we have to use dimethyl, and we have to indicate the position of these 2-methyl, and that would be 2,4-dimethyl 3-pentanone. Okay, and the last example will be a cyclohexanone. This one is a cyclohexanone. Ang rule natin, the carbonyl group will be at carbon number 1, and this one would be numbered clockwise such that this is number 3 and number 4. The identity of this substituent is hydroxy, and this is methyl. So therefore that is 3-hydroxy-4-methyl cyclohexanone. Hydroxy comes first before methyl because of alphabetical listing. The 3 represents to where the hydroxy has been attached. Dyan sa naka-attach. The 4 represents ganun din kung pang ilan, anong carbon atoms siya naka-attach. And the cyclohexanone is the parent chain. Note, we don't have any number because it was assumed that as a rule, it was at carbon number 1. So no need for the number for the cyclic ketone.